share.
Welcome to our Diversity and Inclusion in the Workplace webinar. Here at Grad, are absolutely delighted to be hosting this webinar today. It's the first time that we've done an employer webinar on diversity and inclusion, so we're really thankful to be joined by all our guest speakers. I'll give you a quick introduction to our panel here today. We've got Luke with us from Diversifying.
Hello.
Hello. We've got Alex from Pink News.
Hi.
Shana from ThinkLila.
Hi everyone.
And Adeva, who is here. She is the Let's Talk About Race webinar speaker.
Hi everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. Before we start, for those who don't already know about Give a Grad a Go, I'm going to do a quick introduction to what we do. So our clients range from startups to global institutions, and we help businesses scale up their teams with the best talent time and time again. We provide a bespoke service to fit your specific hiring needs, and with a 13 working average time to fill a role, this is way ahead of the industry average of 42 days. We also have over 10 years experience to rapidly and accurately connect businesses with top graduates in the UK and globally. But what we're looking at now is really helping our clients and candidates beyond the hiring process. And that's why we're doing this webinar today and our other webinars and partnerships with over 30 companies and universities in the past 6 months to bring you more information that does go beyond your hiring process with us. So another example of this that I wanted to share with you before we start is our recent diversity and inclusion statistics. So we are committed to helping businesses address their equality and diversity processes and build fairer ways of employment. We did this by doing an anonymous survey with job seekers and graduates, gathering data from over 1,000 participants. I will be sharing this round at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to find it then and have a read in more detail. There'll be a QR code at the end, but this will also be emailed round in a follow-up email with the link as well. But I wanted to highlight some of the most important things that we found. So in that, we found that 90% of people are more inclined to work for a diverse company. This is obviously a massive number and shows the importance of making your company more diverse. 30% of participants also said that they felt overlooked for roles due to discrimination. So it's clear that forward-thinking companies who promote inclusive workplaces will be at an advantage. Some other things that are interesting to note are the top 3 changes that these people interviewed thought would encourage a more inclusive workplace. So this is something that perhaps we could take away and start implementing in your business from the get-go, really straight after this webinar. So the first thing that came up at 67.5% is equal salary for similar positions. Furthermore, the second point at 57.7% was having the same opportunities for all. And thirdly, with 34.8%, there's mentoring schemes for all. Again, I will be sharing this afterwards, so we'll be going over them in more detail there. So at Give a Grad a Go, we've been working closely with Luke from Diversifying, who's with us today, to help our diversity promise and work out how we as a company can become more diverse and inclusive. So some of the ways that we've been doing this so far is broadening the range of charities we support. A great example of this is we've been in partnership and sponsoring WizKids, and we're actually implementing a new referral scheme in which you can donate your fee to WizKids. But again, there'll be more information about this at the end of the webinar. We're also making some adjustments to the training that we offer. Recently, we've been working with a company called Student Hubs who are doing a training for us on unconscious bias. A little bit more about unconscious bias and how this is working with Give a Grad a Go. We've changed the ways that we spec our CVs. So we're removing the unconscious bias and reducing discrimination by taking off the details, names, location, etc. of candidates before we send them over. So it will just be their work experience on the CVs. This is one of the ways that we're trying to educate ourselves and also the clients that we work with to build on diversity and inclusion. So what this then means for your company, with this varied graduate talent pool that we have, this means that if you are looking to balance out the structure of your workplace, then hiring graduates is a very instant and straightforward way to go about this. Although long-term, this might not resolve all problems, such as female leaders in FTSE 100. We can't promise that we can do that just by hiring new graduates, but you will know that if you are hiring from our diverse pool of graduates, then you are making the right step to having a more diverse future, not just for your company, but overall. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Luke Davis, co-founder of Diversifying and BAME Recruitment. Luke, thank you so much for being here today, and I'll pass over to you for a quick introduction.
Thank you, Katie, and thanks very much for having me. I guess in the briefish introduction that I'd love to share is probably a bit around the story around why, as an organisation, we started and why am I involved, particularly as a middle-aged white man who probably might be viewed by some as like kind of what's your involvement in this. So the organisation was originally started by my wife Cynthia, who had worked similar to me 20 plus years in recruitment and talent, and Cynthia's story was one of working towards the end of her career in big corporate internal talent functions, and particularly ones where there was a lot of money that was being spent, a lot of focus being spent on diversifying or being more diverse. And Cynthia was looking around the room, particularly towards the end, and seeing lots and lots of really good graduates coming in, very diverse graduates. But when she looked around the room, particularly at a more senior level, wasn't seeing that gender diversity, and in many cases was often the only person of non-white ethnicity that was sat around the room at a certain level. And it left a really indelible mark for Cynthia to think about, well, look, I'm really not happy about this, and having become a recent mum, what kind of future am I leaving for our daughter, or what's the kind of legacy that I want to see in the world? So BAME Recruitment was started originally to try and create some more role models, because Cynthia's fear was that without more role models at a more senior level, that are we going to see those graduates then go up to become female CEOs, or people from different backgrounds believe that they can become a CEO, and her fear was that that might not be the case. Like a lot of organizations, though, or people that then devote themselves to doing this type of work, you start to realize the help and support that organizations need, the help and support that candidates need, goes way beyond a kind of an occasional role here and there. So we're increasingly evolving our services, and we'd probably describe ourselves best now as a diversity and consulting services organization. And what we do, or what we decide to do, is basically anything that serves our purpose, which is to create fair and equal career opportunities. We will be involved in that. But we're the type of organisation, though, that firmly believes we're there to be a critical friend. So a lot of the work we do, and we have diversity partnerships with bigger companies where we're there to be that critical voice, to maybe call out the things that they can't easily call out themselves, or where maybe people in HR functions, recruitment functions are struggling to be heard because they're an internal voice. Sometimes messages can be received quite differently as an external voice. So we see our role very much to do that. The Diversifying platform, which is our careers job board, was born out of largely people asking us to say, look, we love the recruitment work you're doing. We want a broader access to the kind of candidates that you've got. And our belief system is, and this is something that the data shows us that we see a lot, is that certain people from certain demographics think that maybe certain careers are not for them. So a huge part of the work we do is to open up possibilities, to open up opportunities, to open up belief for people. It's all very well that companies maybe write nice worded adverts, decode adverts, etc. Opening the doors is part of the challenge, but how do you welcome people in? And that's, I suppose, part of the role that we see ourselves playing. I got involved with Cynthia full-time about a year or so ago, probably because I was getting frustrated with hearing the excuses, if I'm being honest. It's, since I can remember back in 2001, 2002, hearing diversity agendas, initiatives, programs, and that just isn't or hasn't been translating itself into action. And my belief system was of, kind of, I can be unhappy about it, or I can do something about it and use my skills and experience to do that. And then clearly, after everything that happened with George Floyd last year in the pandemic, there's a real opportunity, or I hope there's a real opportunity, where now this is no longer just important, this is top of the agenda. That while we've got this opportunity, that this movement isn't just a moment, we exist to help and support organizations and be that critical friend to help them fix the problems they need to fix to allow them to achieve this. Because we fear is that too many organizations see this as a few quick fixes. I change a process, I take names off CVs. That might help maybe a little bit, but you need to be really clear on what you're trying to achieve. And what we're trying to do is help organizations move beyond just trying to be more diverse in how they attract talent, but really think more around, belonging type culture, where whoever you are, from whatever background you are, can have a really good career, not just get through the door. So that gives some insight.
No, that's great. Thanks so much, Luke. So our next speaker is Shana, founder of ThinkLila or Lila. Shana, thanks so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to everyone.
Amazing. Thanks, Katie. So hi, everyone. I'm Shana, and I'll start with a bit about my story. I grew up ethnic minority in Essex, and I kind of always felt like a token Asian. And I never felt really a sense of belonging when I looked to education and to media. And it was always difficult to describe, but it was one of those things that it was sometimes a look, sometimes a comment, sometimes a feeling. But ultimately, I never spoke out about it. And last year in the company I work for, I started trying to make change, and just started out with a simple newsletter to start inspiring people and exciting people, and then help launch the Race Ethnicity Network to our employees. And my experience and background is in innovation. So what I do is we always learn how to think outside the box and apply a challenger mindset. So what I wanted to do is take my kind of day job and apply that mindset to a notoriously difficult subject of diversity and inclusion, where we could resonate with audiences and move that conversation from intense to inspirational. And ultimately, my mission is really to make the world a more inclusive place. So I founded Lila, which is my side hustle, and it's all about bringing this fresh approach to diversity and inclusion and thinking about innovative 360 approaches. So in workshops that I've run before, it's always keeping diversity and inclusion at the top of the conversation, but also examining every touch point and bringing real easy actionable advice to make change, as I've always found that sometimes diversity is seen as this overwhelming and intense subject, and people don't feel confident about it, and as a result, no action is kind of taken. So that's kind of a little bit about me, and I really think that storytelling is a huge part of it, as we resonate with audiences and people feel they're part of the conversation. So yeah, that's me.
That's great. Thanks so much, Shana. And I have to say, personally, you are the most entrepreneurial and innovative person that I know. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Katie.
And our third speaker is Alex, who's the COO at Pink News. So thank you so much, Alex, for being here today. We have absolutely loved working with Pink News over the past few months since we started our partnership. It's been great to speak on your Pink News Futures recently. We had Sam and Claire join you, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
No, thanks for having me back, and it's so nice to hear the other panelists talk about their plugging into the D&I space and all of the good work that's going on, across the board. So it's so inspirational, and the optimism is fab. So my name's Alex. I'm COO at Pink News. We're the world's largest LGBT+ digital publisher. So we obviously have all about the content side of our business, which is incredible, where we reach 50 million users a month across all platforms, websites, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. I'm sure I'm missing some. But that's our main our mission is to inform, inspire, and empower our audiences. And so we've translated that content mission and the amazing stuff we do in the equality, diversity space and content into our events business. And so we you just mentioned, Katie, Pink News Futures, which is our student and young persons LGBT+ undergraduate careers focused event, which is usually an IRL event, but obviously we moved digital last year because of COVID. And the main focus of that event, and just I guess the Pink News Futures ethos and program is as a whole, is to connect employers with a diverse LGBT+ candidate base. And because of Pink News' wide reach, we're really able to access a really diverse group of people and all the intersections within the LGBT+ community. And kind of going on from what Luke said, it's about getting people into the workforce, removing those barriers for people, and educating employers, on best practice, inclusion, creating a sense of belonging, and not just making tokenistic hires, and really making it part of your recruitment strategy, and how you can make those workplaces work for everyone. And so I'm really honored and excited to be part of the Pink News Futures journey, and working with the employers that we do, who are really excited about the talent that can be accessed when you look outside of your usual recruitment channels. And there are some quick fixes, and people just need to be a little bit more creative and think outside the box. And then once you do, it opens you up to this huge candidate base. And whilst COVID has been completely devastating, and I know we are all on a way out of it ASAP, it has shifted the mindset of recruitment, and how people look for talent. We're finding, even Pink News, we've been able to hire, outside of London, have more geographically diverse recruitment strategy. And we've seen lots of companies who are pivoting to that as well. So I'm really excited to see how organizations can build on that, post-vaccine, when we can all go back out and have some fun together.
Yeah, definitely. Can't wait for that time. Thank you, Alex. So our other speaker, our fourth speaker, Adeva, thank you so much for being here today. I know you've got some slides to share as well, because you've been working on the Let's Talk About Race in your workplace. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. Hi everyone, my name is Adeva and I'm an assistant procurement manager at Costain, currently working on the HS2 project. I'm here today because I'm also the chair for the Race Network on the project, and so I host a lot of talks about diversity, inclusion, and sort of cultural awareness webinars as well. And even though my primary sort of focus or angle is coming from a race perspective, I do take a really intersectional approach to diversity and inclusion, often collaborate with our LGBT plus network, disability network, parents and carers, women's network, and those sort of things. And, sort of bringing awareness to these issues. And, like everyone else here has said, that it's not just about increasing the numbers when it comes to diversity and inclusion, but also really tackling policy and culture within the workplace. And a lot of what I do is based on webinars and presentations. And like Katie said, I've got some slides just to answer some of the common questions and topics when, we're talking about diversity and inclusion. So why is it important? Diversity and inclusion is important because businesses today need to be accurately reflecting multicultural society, and by recruiting a diverse workforce, you're ensuring that there is fair representation of historically underrepresented groups within the business. And when we do this, it presents businesses with a unique and invaluable opportunity to identify and make a real effort to remove any unconscious bias that exists within the office. And when you recruit people from remarkably different backgrounds and who have a wide range of lived experience, you're also welcoming diversity of thought into the workplace, which brings fresh ideas, perspectives, and almost always results in heightened innovation. And that's what businesses want. Your business is able to understand its customer or client base a lot better. And linked to this, studies have proven time and time again that there are considerable commercial benefits to having a diverse pool of talent, improved team performance, mainly because when people feel accepted and valued for who they truly are, this happiness translates into greater work outputs. You have more seamless recruitment and employee retention, heightened creativity, greater understanding of clients and supply chain, and just an overall improved brand. And, finally, having colleagues from a wide range of backgrounds is a great way to bring awareness to a host of topics that affect different people, and also just a fun way to celebrate different events, whether that be cultural events, historical events, and stuff like that. And moving on, I think there are three main ways of driving diversity and inclusion, and that's inclusive physical workspace, office culture and language, and then policy and education. So if we start with inclusive physical workspace, studies have shown repeatedly that employees tend to perform better in comfortable spaces that don't invite stress. And whilst this definitely applies to stuff like ergonomic office furniture and the use of pods instead of an open plan workspace, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we're talking about this in a much more focused sense. And I'll give some examples. Does your office space accommodate staff who have physical disabilities? In the UK, there's approximately 14 million people who have disabilities, many of whom will have reduced physical mobility, and therefore, if the only way to access your office is via 3 flights of stairs, obviously that's not very inclusive. But we sort of know, about wheelchair access, it's really enshrined in legislation when we're talking about office space, and there are a lot of other considerations which are a lot less well known. For example, having multi-sensory safety alarms, if you have a fire alarm, are they auditory and visual? Because some people are visually impaired and other people are audibly impaired. So if you just have a flashing light, people who are blind might not know that, there's a safety alarm. Having door handles that are levers instead of doorknobs, because, doorknobs require a firm grip and twist. Flat panel light switches rather than a small toggle switch, because they require dexterity. Another way to have an inclusive workspace is, is asking yourself, do you have gender neutral bathrooms for non-binary colleagues to use? And do you also actively encourage transgender employees to use bathrooms that align with their gender identity? I've heard some really harrowing stories where non-binary and trans members of staff have actively avoided drinking water, tea, coffee, or whatever at work because they're really distressed about not having adequate bathroom access and not feeling welcomed. And, by doing something as simple as instituting gender neutral bathrooms and adopting a trans inclusive bathroom policy, you're greatly easing any anxiety they have about being their true self at work and allowing them to focus on their job and being a positive member of the team. And also another thing is just having a private space for religious prayer observance. We should be encouraging line managers to encourage their direct reports to feel confident to practice their faith in the workplace. An example of that is if you have a practicing Muslim who observes their 5 daily prayers, do they feel comfortable enough to, taking 10 minutes out of the day, maybe 3 times a day, to go pray? If we move on to office culture and language, I think it's really important to have regular cultural and social awareness talks because it's just a great way to bring awareness to a variety of social issues relevant to your diverse workforce and educate colleagues on important topics. And hosting these regularly means that people will become more comfortable having these difficult conversations, and then it will just generally broaden their understanding of various topics. Having senior management lead by example, I think, is really, really important. Senior leadership within company hierarchy, I think, underestimate their influence on their colleagues. There's strong evidence that suggests that there is definitely a trickle-down effect when it comes to managers influencing the behavior and attitudes towards EDI. So if you have senior leadership that promotes and upholds inclusive values, the rest of the workforce will tend to follow suit. And a really easy way to do that is having their own pronouns in their email signature, which then encourages other people to do it, and then makes people who are non-binary or trans feel comfortable having their pronouns in their email signature. Constructively calling out colleagues when inappropriate language or behavior is exhibited in the workplace, because the more we normalize and encourage appropriate and inclusive behaviors, the more it becomes habitual for staff to do that, and then you're cultivating an open and inclusive work environment. Clamping down on offensive language, that's something that's really, really important. And just some really broad examples, saying things like coloured when you're referring to ethnic minorities, calling people with disabilities a various number of slurs, that you can't be doing that in the workplace and you shouldn't be doing it outside of the workplace. And I think clamping down on that in policy and in practice is really important. And moving on to policy and education, these are things that I'm specifically passionate about. So the first one is establishing employee-led networks, because these offer a support function to employees from marginalized groups. And it is basically...
Is it this slide or the next one? Sorry.
Next, if you keep going.
Okay.
This one,
Cool.
yeah. And so networks are basically a group underpinned by a collective commitment to positive representation and inclusivity in the workplace, amplifies the voices of underrepresented staff. You can bring awareness to social issues, challenge attitudes, as well as assisting in the development of policy, practice, and data collection. Also, conducting regular employee satisfaction surveys is a great way to gather qualitative, realistic data of how employees actually feel about office culture and policy. And when you hear feedback directly from, colleagues, it allows businesses to assess whether their EDI objectives are being met, or are they just performative? Are they affecting real change? Regular policy review alongside employee networks, compulsory EDI training for all staff, including diversity and inclusion objectives in job descriptions and appraisals, by making this commitment to being, making sure that inclusivity and diversity is a performance metric. It ensures that staff take it seriously and have clear deliverables related to this commitment. And then finally, benchmarking progress against other organizations, sharing best practice with other organizations is really key. And I appreciate that I've just waffled on for quite a bit, but I think these are just really clear, simple ways of, driving diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And this is the sort of thing that I talk about both within my own organization and with external organizations as well.
No, Adeva, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know I've definitely learned a lot, and I hope that all of our participants and attendees here have as well. So I would like to now open the floor to any questions that people have coming in. But I'd also like to start off with one of our questions. So I know that Luke, you have been absolutely invaluable in helping Give a Grad a Go really start working towards a more diverse and inclusive workplace for both us and our clients. And I want to put emphasis on start because we don't intend for it to end. So I just wanted to ask you, and also open to the panel, what advice would you have for any company who is looking to really start? What are those sort of first steps in becoming more diverse and inclusive?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of practical tips that could be given, but the biggest blocker that I see, and this is probably when you start thinking about how do you move from good intentions and talk to action, is that I think there's far too many companies that are still talking about this stuff. They've been talking about it for 15 years or more, and it's still talk. Just stop being scared, stop being so fearful of what could go wrong if you start opening the lid on some of these conversations and having some dialogue. So pick something that you can do. I know in the case of Give a Grad a Go, I think it was like really trying to zone in on data and having a really good and clear understanding of who are your candidates and where are they coming from. And I think, you know, sometimes you might be fearful around what the reality looks like, and actually if you start to measure it, maybe it's better than you realize. So pick something, have a plan, get going, don't be scared, get out of that mindset around something awful is going to happen if we start talking about it. I think you need to move beyond that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you've got to just step up to the challenge, and create meaningful change. One of the things we're like really working on at the moment is addressing the ethnicity imbalance in some of the teams. But the media industry is 94% white. That is a fact. And then within that, we're a LGBT plus organization, so all the intersections that play into that. But we're like, hey, we're not going to like rest on our laurels. We're doing some really thoughtful pieces of recruitment at the moment involving team members. We've connected with BYP, Black Young Professional Network. We are Black Journos. So really like reaching out to the community and like expanding our network to, source new talent, because, it's not enough to just put an ad on, I don't know, we use Cision, if anyone knows that for media, but Guardian jobs, for example, and, accessing the same kind of talent, you've really got to look at where you can reach out to candidates that you wouldn't usually track. So yeah, I definitely agree with Luke there. You've just got to, create action and just do it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree to on both your points. I like to talk about the celebrating the small wins along the journey, and it's important to just be proud of that, of you're taking those steps, and those small steps will make a sizable difference. And one thing I did want to bring up is keeping diversity at the top of the conversation. And sometimes we kind of need to move that onus from it being all focused on HR to actually we're all in this together, and this is a conversation for everyone to be had, and we all have a responsibility to make change. And one thing I talk about in some of the workshops that I do is you can actually start doing it right now. And I know you said about first step, Katie. So one of the things I talk about is if you just get up your phone and start scrolling on Instagram now, which you should be watching this webinar, so to maybe not do that now, but today, go through your Instagram feed and have a look who you're following and the people on there. Do they all look the same? Do they all have the same values? And it's a really great way to start bringing diversity of thought into your everyday life. And because it's a habit, all of us are on social media a lot more these days. Think about who you can follow on your feed to start making change. What communities can you be a part of, and start thinking about and opening up that diversity of thought is a really great kind of first step to start thinking about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything everyone said, actually. You've all hit the nail on the head. I think it's just a case of just get out there and do it. Stop talking about it. There are enough resources. We know, this is something we should be doing. Just do it. I think one of the great ways of doing this is set up a task force or a steering group, whatever you want to call it, of people immediately, in the case, who are dedicated to action and setting some clear objectives for the first 2 months for the first quarter. And like Shana said, celebrate your small wins. You don't have to change the world in your first 6 months of enrolling diversity and inclusion ideas out. You can do something as simple as establishing employee networks or sending out an employee survey or something, but just do something small that you can achieve that will get the ball rolling. And yeah, I think it's a case of just get out there and do it rather than talking about it. We can talk about it until we're blue in the face, but until you translate those words into action, you're not going to achieve that much.
No, that's so great. Thank you, everyone. So we've actually had a couple of questions come in. The first one is from Sally, and she's asked, this is a great question. When you're advertising roles in your company on social media or through a recruitment platform, what ways can you ensure that people will feel comfortable applying? The example she's used specifically is, would you recommend using certain words? I'm sure you guys have a lot more advice on that.
If I can maybe have the first go. So I think it's helpful. There's tools out there you can use that will help look at gender neutral language and things like that. I think having looked at this challenge really, really deeply, though, is that I think where people go wrong is that there's a lot of tired language that I think starts to feed itself into job adverts and job descriptions. Things like fast paced or must be dynamic or must be energetic. And I think if you stop using cliches and actually just describe what will the person be doing and what will they be capable of? And I think they're safety check it, get different people to look at it. Do think about, if you're using words that are overly masculine or too far the other way, like think about that and apply a safety check process. But I do feel that I personally think there's a bit too much focus been on some of these tools that will give you a score and stuff like that. And that's great. It's not unhelpful, but it doesn't really solve the problem, which I think is around, why don't you just describe what you want the person to do and what success will look like in the role? The only other thing I would add to that as well is, which I think is the biggest problem when it comes to job adverts, I think we're all so fixated on looking at somebody's experiences. So where have they worked? What have they done? And I think if we switch that and reframe that around, how can people show that they've got the capability to do the things that we need them to do or to be really good in the role? I think that opens up the talent pool massively. If you're just badge collecting or they worked at a similar company or they've worked in a similar role, that is not what true diversity looks like. So for me, it doesn't really matter what you put in the job adverts if you're just going to be looking for people that have largely done the same thing. So I would say words would be like, be really open-minded. One tactic I use sometimes when I'm struggling to write them is just like get a dictaphone, like describe what it is you want the person to do. And you'll tend to find that language is really good. The language that's really bad is the very tired, cliched, or if you use an old job description that someone's been using for the last 10 years or something like that, that would be the advice I would give, Sally.
Yeah, and just to add on the skills and experience, one big thing that we're looking at the moment is also like education. Is a bachelor's necessary for certain roles? For like most, unless you're being a doctor, like I don't know, like another job that like necessarily needs one. So I think really like challenge line managers on why they're asking for a bachelor, hiring managers, sorry, why they're asking for a bachelor's. Why are we asking for 8 years experience and paying £20,000? I think you really need to like challenge some of those, the experience that Luke said, but also, education and training. Why not just have equivalent experience over degree, or, worked in a different degree and made a sideways move? I think it's just about, working closely with hiring managers on, what they're really looking for, from a role. And that's where sort of HR and the D&I and the people kind of strategy can really, help drive the business in that sense.
That's great, thank you. Diva and Shana, do you have anything else to add to that, or would you like to move on to the next question?
Yeah, well, I was going to touch on what Adeva actually chatted about in the beginning about adding a statement can be really a great way to do that, and also checking your 360 comms. So your website, your Instagram, your social, is it a welcoming place? Because that might already be a barrier that you haven't thought about in terms of people applying. So maybe think about that as well.
If I'm honest, I think everyone smashed it. I don't really think I have much more to add, to be honest. Great job, guys.
No, that's great. Diva, this question is probably a great one for you, because I know that you mentioned that you think it's a great idea for people in their first step to actually get started, start up something to do with D&I in their workplace, get those actions and stop speaking about it. So someone's asked in, Lorna has said, I've been tasked with setting up a D&I forum, which she's been told to chair. She's a white, straight female, and she's now thinking of being the logistic person and having an employee-led forum. She would love some tips and guidance on how to bring a D&I forum to life.
I think the best way to bring it to life is really reach out to the people that you work with from different backgrounds. And also don't be scared of, if you're having to chair this forum and if you're a straight white female who's cisgender, don't be scared about, I don't feel qualified enough to do this. This is not necessarily about leading, it's just about coordinating. That's my experience of being a chair. I'm mixed race, so I have a very different experience to somebody who is fully black or dark skinned. So we have different lived experiences, and also I represent people who aren't black, they might be Asian, or another ethnic minority. So I think the key thing is using your role to amplify people's voices rather than necessarily feeling as if you have to lead from head on. And also I think setting up a steering group is a really great way to sort of get your ideas translated into action. So with a steering group, you get a smaller group from the forum who will help you in determining deliverables, objectives for your first quarter. But I also think doing anonymous surveys is a great way of establishing a vision. So when I was setting up the race network, I did a survey for the network members of what they wanted out of the network, and you could do the same for the forum, because you might not necessarily want the forum to work alongside senior leadership and developing policy. You might not want to lead cultural awareness talks. You might just want to have it as a support function for people who are a part of the forum. So I think it's a really good way using steering groups and surveys to understand what people actually want to get from the forum, and then from that you can use it to build what your mission statement is. And I think identifying your mission statement and writing it is a great way to keep you organized. It keeps you sort of committed to whatever the cause is for that forum.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Katie has asked a sort of similar question, so it'd be great to get some more insight on this. For a startup with no HR function yet, what intentional things can people managers do to embed D&I in the company? So I guess it's kind of exploring on from what you were just saying, Diva, but in a slightly different setting. I don't know, who would like to answer that one?
I can start. So I'm assuming, Katie, that it might be a smaller company if it has no kind of HR function.
Yeah,
I think
you said it's a startup.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I think a really good way to do that is bring in storytelling through panels. You can get voices and underrepresented voices in to chat about certain subjects and bring that story to life. Also, a really good way is to really nurture those underrepresented voices in the business. So is it that you have coaching sessions and mentoring that you can set up and start doing that? And yeah, I think it's difficult with a smaller business because it's hard to then create like an internal network, but it might be that there are a few people that are really wanting to make change, and there might just be a couple of them that can start sending around, for example, like resources, like sometimes even things like a Netflix show or a podcast to listen to is actually really helpful to start understanding the conversation. You can tie it in as well with cultural events over the year, and just as well thinking about making it really simple for yourself. Try not to overcomplicate it, and it's really hard because it's such a different subject and we do have quite a lot of overwhelm, but maybe start with doing that and really opening up that conversation so people can really chat openly and honestly.
Yeah,
maybe add. Oh, sorry, let's go.
No, I was just going to on the back. Yes, say find out what people's priorities are. If you're in a small company, that's great. Use that to your advantage because you haven't got this big beast of an organization, and like red tape and challenges. So like you're actually in like a really privileged position to be able to chat with your colleagues and look at your workforce and see what's missing, where you want to grow, how you want to get there. And my big thing is consult. We've got such an amazing, diverse team at Pink News who are so knowledgeable on their areas. And so I'm just like, I reach out to my colleagues and speak with them and involve them in all of my policy ideation, the full process, the consultation. That's a really big piece for me. And so being in a startup, I think, that's a great, I'd say that's some good advice, is just to consult and get everyone involved. You're not alone.
And if I could maybe add, and a fair bit of consulting with startups or small organizations, the lack of HR is not a weakness in focusing on this. And the big thing that I'd love to see, if there's one step change that I think, we talked a bit, or Adeva talked earlier about leadership, taking responsibility, that I think as managers, why can't it be part of any performance metrics that you've got, that the ability to build and manage diverse teams is built into how you manage, whether they're managing effectively or not. And I think the danger is if you don't do that early, and I've seen this a lot, is when you have an organization that maybe hires a couple of people and then they go and hire their friends of friends and friends of friends. Before you know it, you're 40, 50, 60 people big, and you've got a very dominant demographic of certain people that work in the organization. So if you don't get intentional now, even though you haven't got HR, you're going to save yourself a lot of heartache later, because you can actually build what you want the organization to become, rather than what everybody else is trying to do is undo the organization as it's structured now is not what they intended it to be.
Yeah, I think Adeva said it at the start that it's like, I think we need to get out of the mindset that it's just HR and the people functions responsibility for all this. Like, it is owned by the business. So really instilling it in line managers to help drive the culture is really, really important, because otherwise it can get a little bit binary if it's only one person dealing with it and they're the one focusing on certain issues.
Oh, that's great, thank you. So another question that we've had in, which I think we were all discussing just before the webinar as well, so it's great that this has come up again. It's really good to hear about using the right language and words in what we're using. One of their people raised an objection to using BAME as another label for everyone who is different. Is BAME as one word, or is it BAME to represent the different groups? Please could you tell us a bit more about this, and what is the correct way to go about this? Luke, I don't know if you're smiling at me, the best person to answer this first.
I'm smiling. I don't know. Well, I've got quite a succinct answer, because obviously part of the business we have is called BAME Recruitment, and that name was given to the business by Cynthia, who founded it, who is a Black female. So I'm kind of thinking maybe I shouldn't go first, and maybe give after, unless anyone else wants to answer it.
I don't mind talking about it, because this is actually something that came up when I was establishing the race network on our project. So at the moment, we're called the Race Network, but that name is due to be changed. We're actually hosting a survey amongst our members what they want to be called. And originally, when I brought, the proposal to our senior leadership about having a network that represented ethnic minorities, they're like, okay, yeah, let's have a BAME or BAMI network. And when I brought this to network members, so it's really tricky. The majority, I would say, a slight majority of our network members are from a Black background, so Afro-Caribbean background, and I know that amongst Black diaspora there is a sometimes reluctance to use the term BAME or BAMI, and the reason behind that is I think that it can be quite easy to use that umbrella term and group ethnic minorities' experiences together and treat them the same, when that's not the case. They're separate ethnic minorities completely and have very different experiences, and that's not to undermine their experiences at all. It's not what I like to call an oppression Olympics, who has it worst off. That's not what we're talking about here. We're just being realistic that there is a different treatment in different spaces, different languages used, there are different stereotypes, and BAME, in my opinion, for the purposes of my race network, I didn't think that it was an accurate reflection of what we were trying to do. So yeah, I think that it really is down to personal preference, because I've met numerous of people from ethnic minority background who have no issue with using BAME or BAMI, or however you want to pronounce it. They said that the whole reason that we have that term is just talking about anybody that's not white, and I agree. I think if you're talking about anybody who's not white, using BAME or BAMI is fine, because that's who you're talking about, essentially Black, Asians, or minority ethnic people. But for my or actually our race network on the project, we felt that we wanted to sort of pay homage and underline the fact that different ethnic minorities have a different experience, and we want to treat them as separate. And also because the focus of our network isn't just on race or SST, but we also talk about cultural heritage and religion as well. So that's another reason. But yeah, that's just my perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to add our perspective on it is that I think where the problem is, or we think where the problem is that lazy thinking means that people are using it to describe a culture. BAME is not a culture, it's not a demographic. There is no BAME community, it doesn't exist. It's a data point to explain that we have a problem. And the problem is there's been an over focus on whiteness, and that was the origins of the word. So we get really unhappy when we see like the newspapers talk about that person's from a BAME community, or somebody gets introduced as being BAME. For us, it has no place to label somebody. It doesn't belong with a person. Absolutely, we think okay, or in our perspective, okay to use as a reference point around this area needs some focus. But it's very common. One of the first bits of feedback we often have to give in the consulting work we do is that organizations are trying to lump BAME and everything and go, well, what's the problem? I've got a BAME person represented here, or I've got a BAME person in that job, and it's like, I'm sorry, what's a BAME person? It's not a thing. So for us, it's a focus on the mission, and that's why we're okay with the word, but fully appreciate and agree with people's unhappiness with how it's being used, or people being labelled with it. And I urge people to stop being lazy about that. It's not okay. Oh, you're on mute.
That's great. Thank you very sorry. I was on mute there. So I'll go on to the next question now. So we've had loads come through, and I would like to say to everyone, thank you so much for sending in your questions. We will aim to answer as many as we possibly can in this session, but I'll be sending up a follow-up email. So if you do have anything else that you wanted to get in touch about, please do let us know. So Eleanor sent in a great question. She said, I want to say thank you to the panel firstly, thank you. And she's working on a campaign to engage a student group with the need for ethnic diversity in stem cell donation. So understandably, students are quite busy and they're stressed at the moment. Is there a less intense way that she can keep them engaged when talking about inclusion and diversity? I don't know who feels most comfortable answering that one first.
I'll have a go. I'll have a crack at this one. So yeah, I do appreciate that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, sometimes it can come across as quite intense, because talking about these social issues for a lot of people can be quite triggering, can also be just quite overwhelming and uncomfortable. I think the best way of keeping it less intense is diversifying how you're relaying this information. You don't always necessarily want to do training courses or hand out leaflets. There can be a wide range of resources that you can use to communicate these issues, whether that be suggesting to people to attend workshops which are a bit more interactive rather than just sitting and watching a training video, or encouraging people to attend webinars like this where you can ask questions, where it's more of a dialogue rather than a lecture. And also, I think creating opportunities to have guest speakers who are talking about their experience is a great way of doing that. So on our project, I know that our LGBT plus network often invite outside speakers to represent groups who are underrepresented within our organization, but that is a great way to hear directly, straight from the horse's mouth, their lived experiences and advice and their views on how to improve certain things. So yeah, I think the best way to keep it less intense is definitely use a variety of media and resources when you're trying to talk about these sort of things. And yeah, I would stress the onus of making it less as a lecture and more as a dialogue and sort of just like a learning opportunity, from my perspective anyway.
No, that's great, thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add to that before we move on to the next question? Perfect. Alex, I think this might be a good question for you. Dorothy's got in touch and asked, she said she thinks that using pronouns in email signatures is a great idea, but she's asked how they would go about encouraging staff who don't wish to do the same.
Sorry. Yes, good question. Sorry, you know what? The stem cell thing threw me on the other questions. Definitely not my area of expertise.
It's fine.
What was I going to say? Do you know what? I think it all comes back to leading from the top and management. It's about people feeling that there's not an argument why we shouldn't, it's why we should. It's all about inclusion, making people feel accepted, people bringing their true selves to work, not making assumptions about people's gender identity or sexuality. So I think it's just, I think management leading with intention, having clear policies around that, why you're doing it, that it's coming from a positive space. Yeah, there is an education piece there. Was it Dorothy? Sorry. Was that the name of the person? Yeah, sorry. Hi, Dorothy. Yeah, I think it's an education piece, and being really thoughtful about why you're doing it. Not just dropping an email out to the organization one day saying, everyone must put their pronouns in their email signature. It's speaking about the justification behind that, the reasoning why, the inclusion piece, and that your company, wholeheartedly believes that, and their values are about everyone bringing their true selves to work, which is why Pink News does it, to ensure everyone is accepted. And that we're honoring everyone's gender identities and who they are. So I think it's all coming from a positive space. It's not about no worries, Dorothy. Hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, it's just how I view it anyway, and that's like the education piece within Pink News. And when I talk about it with people, it's only a positive thing for everyone. You don't know what you might have some amazing, as we referenced earlier, non-binary talent. There's the full spectrum of gender identity out there, and that kind of goes all the way back to the job ad. Making sure you've got a really clear statement in there about hiring people from different backgrounds. So it's not just about having the pronouns in the email signature. I think it's like that full spectrum of collateral and policy and how you position yourself as an employer. Because if you just have the pronouns in the email signature, that is quite performative. But you have to make sure that is a thread throughout your entire recruitment, onboarding, people process, and your company culture.
No, that's great. Thanks so much, Alex. So we've got another question through from Nick, and he's saying, what do we do with the Oxbridge thing? The statistics show that the education system does not deliver a diverse input. However, we can get great people if we do focus on Oxbridge. So I think, Luke, this would be a great question for you, but I'd also like to answer slightly about Give a Grad a Go's input here. So we have actually been in discussions with the 93% Society at Cambridge, and they're a society that actually have sister societies with multiple other universities, and they focus on that divide of people coming in, the equality and the diversity of Oxford and Cambridge, to look at when they're getting in and how they're becoming more diverse and what those universities are doing and their input in this movement. Of course, this is not something that Give a Grad a Go will be able to tackle themselves. However, because we are making and constantly working towards making our processes more diverse and inclusive, what this means is that when you recruit through us, at least you will have that platform already raised for you with our processes that we've already implemented. So of course, if you did go straight to Oxbridge, this would be an issue. However, we hope that what we've been doing and what Luke has massively helped us with will slightly start to raise that impact of the bias there. Luke, I'm not sure if you've got some more to add to that.
I think I'll probably just add that to be clear here, university education isn't bad, and people that go and attain an amazing degree from an amazing university and have the academic capability to do that, that's not a bad thing. That's really good, and that's definitely not what this argument is. I think the point is that asking yourself deeply and honestly around, am I judging someone solely on the fact that they've got university education and a university education from those type of universities, or am I opening the door to look at people who maybe didn't have the opportunity for whatever reason to be able to study beyond A levels or study beyond GCSEs or whatever it might be? And I think that's the point here. And look, if it's a case of you like to have Oxbridge talent, well, great, include that as part of your talent strategy, brilliant. But maybe don't include it as the only part of your talent strategy, and level the playing field. So however then you're measuring what good looks like, you're not measuring it based on, well, they went to a university that I know and understand. You're building a proper assessment process that allows every candidate, regardless of whether they were Oxbridge educated or not, to be judged in the same way and fairly in the same way. Then great, why not? And we actively encourage everybody to say, look, get as much of the great talent from everywhere that you can, but just assess it in the same way and don't let your bias come through in how you make that decision.
Yeah, we have so at Pink News Futures that Give a Grad a Go has been involved with, actually used to be called LGBT Leaders. Pink News absorbed LGBT leaders, and that was really focused on like your Oxbridge universities and really focusing on accessing LGBT plus talent from those red bricks into the big four and law firms, etc. And when we you know, when we wanted to sort of pivot the mission of that and, you know, create a more inclusive recruitment program, we were like, well, why are we just connecting universities with red brick unis, the people that will automatically kind of, you know, apply for those jobs anyway and have the confidence to do that and have the education and the means to do that. Yeah, as Luke said, it's really about, you know, educating employers and clients around, you know, is that the only sort of recruitment strategy, you know, a viable recruitment strategy for them to access that talent, which is why going digital for Pink News Futures has been such an amazing experience for us, because we have been able to connect employers with talent from all around the country, from all walks of life, from all different education backgrounds. And, you know, especially accessing things like, you know, summer graduate schemes and all of those other gateways into employment that don't necessarily rely on a you know, a red brick university. So yeah, I think it's really important to yeah, to challenge that perception and those biases 100%.
That's great, thank you. So we've had a really interesting question come in from Jeremy, who's asked, and this is something that we haven't actually had time to discuss that much in this session, and it's something that I know I'd be very keen to discuss and look at in the future. He's asked, what about the age prejudice? You know, we've covered race and LGBTQ+, which is great and of course needs to be addressed, but he's asked if anyone has been involved with tackling the issue of letting older people get back into work, and perhaps, I guess, any tips or any information that anyone would like to share on that equally important topic. Don't know who feels comfortable answering that one.
I love a first go, because I think it's a really important question, and I think you know, a big part of our mission has always been and continues to be is around not forgetting anybody in this. And I think clearly during different bits of society, different topics will become louder and noisier and more to the forefront. But I think what I'm hearing from everybody here is this focus on equality. So clearly ageism is a big issue. And I think a lot of people have referenced it. A lot of it's that kind of bit when someone's coming up with a job description around, you know, if again you're looking at experiences, that's when you start to hear from hiring managers things like, oh, they're too experienced for the role or whatever else, rather than can they do the job? And it's quite a straightforward question, really. Like, do they want to work here? Do they fit with our values? Can they do the job? And seeing that, and only seeing that. So I do think that ageism will become even more of an issue, and I think there's some useful and important data coming out of the groups of people that are mostly affected by the pandemic and the massive rise in unemployment. And clearly a lot of that is people earlier in their careers, and there's a very large part of that people are in their kind of like mid-careers, those that are sort of 45, 50, 55 plus, who still need to work for very many years, 10, 15 years plus, and are really struggling because they're struggling to get a look in. And I think it comes down to good assessment criteria and removing bias. And I think if you're open-minded around, I will just let the best candidate get the job regardless of who they are and their backgrounds, and here's my really clear assessment criteria to let the process help me choose who gets the job. That for me is the best way that you can tackle that. But it is a big problem, and it's an insidious problem. And I think it's one that will come more to the fore.
That's great. Thank you so much for answering that. So I'm conscious that we're getting to the end of our time, so I'll just answer this final question that's come in. And this is a great opportunity for everyone to have a shameless plug, because I know that all of us have been involved in so many activities and have a great amount of resources and content available. Claire has asked, following Diva's answer, about suggesting running a D&I employee training course. Can you suggest any ideally free resources that we could use to set up and run a course like this? Alex, I don't know if you want to go first. Pink News Futures, of course, is incredible, so perhaps we could share a bit more about that for Claire and anyone else that's interested in some content and resources on D&I.
Oh, sorry, was that? Sorry, I didn't realize that was that.
Yeah.
Apologies. Yeah, so Pink News Futures, employers, students, we all come together and just generally have a great 5 days of sessions, webinars, talks, skills building around D&I, specifically in the LGBT plus intersectional space. So yeah, totally free. Our next one is in April, and I can get Katie to disseminate some information about that. And you know, if you're on like newsletters lists, or just drop us an email at futures@pinknews.co.uk, and we'll get in touch with you. But yeah, we'd love to have you as part of our community, yeah, and work with you in that space where our expertise lies. Thank you.
Oh, just to add to this, there are a lot of charitable organizations who have a wealth of free resources online, which you can just look at and use and adapt, for your business. I also think that social media is a really great place to find like free tools. I know that after the death of George Floyd last year, there were so many resources being shared online about how to really embed racial diversity and inclusion sort of training in the workplace. Also, the Open University has quite a lot of free online materials as well that you can use, download. But yeah, honestly, on Google, there is just so many. There is a wealth of free resources on there. I think it's always best to stick to sort of the reputable sort of sources, because in the age of social media it's quite easy to have misinformation be disseminated. So I'd say stick to sort of the big charitable organizations, and I will happily send some to Katie, and you can share them around with any listeners, which might help them establishing their sort of training practices at work.
Yeah, no, definitely just building on that. LinkedIn Learning is quite helpful as well. Definitely just start looking at that if there's a specific focus that you have. Just good for getting some context is really important. I've actually just started launching a YouTube channel to do this and bring that free resources to life. But there's also people like MEFA, MEFA, and the other box are really good, and Spark and Co as well on Instagram, which are helpful for specific definitions and understanding conversations, which might help with confidence. But the same, I'm happy to send over some extra resources and help as much as I can. If you want to jump on a call, always here to help.
I would say there's also, I know you obviously said free resources, but there are a lot of paid for, but reasonably priced resources, and I think it's really important to consider to speak with whoever the budget holders are and consider the value that can bring to the organization, to hear from people in the space, and people that have those expertise should charge for them, obviously. So we work with an organization called Gendered Intelligence, did our trans awareness training. Stonewall does some great work. So I think there's lots of free stuff out there, which is amazing, and great advice from the panel. But yeah, also consider where you might need to invest in budget for training, because I think it's really important to if you're especially tackling something like trans inclusion in the workplace, you need someone with that lived experience that's really going to come in and give like solid training on that area. Just as an example, as per other areas. So yeah, definitely sort of, I would say, have challenging budget conversations, and what's the ROI on a £500 training session, and it might be exponential compared to the the investment that you're able to put into that.
Luke, I don't know if you had anything to add on the resources as well.
There was loads there, which is amazing. I would just say, just pick simple topics. I think don't try and do D&I in one session. Pick really simple topics, whether you start with allyship or something that's quite easy to begin with, and then pick that topic and look at what resources are available. Do that, and then I think it'll help you start to steer where to go next. And if you look at it in one go, you're going to overwhelm massively.
No, that's great advice. Thank you so much, everyone. We are going slightly over the time, and I'm conscious that this is a lunchtime session. Everyone's probably getting very hungry. So I'll let you all go, but a massive thank you to all of you so much for being on the panel. You've all been absolutely amazing, and I know that I've learned so much, and I can't imagine how invaluable this has also been to all of our clients and all the businesses that are on here today as well. So yeah, a massive thank you to you, and to everyone else that's here watching. We will be sending around a follow-up email with all the links that we've been discussing today, and I appreciate that we didn't have time to answer all the questions, so if you would like to get in touch, then please do, and we can answer them later on.